All right. Good evening, everybody. This is Halton Garden Week. My name is Helen Stevenson. I'm the Community Garden Coordinator for Oakville, Milton, and Acton. And tonight I am with Brenda Ley from Milton Horticultural Society. Brenda Ley is a lifelong gardener and dedicated Milton Horticultural Society member and volunteer. She has a passion for the dramatic, the big and bold, the dark, splotched, and variegated, and unexpected color combinations. After spending most of 2020 on bed rest, her focus suddenly changed to the very small. It all started with a gift of 3 little baby succulents. So, Brenda, I was saying this a little bit before we let everybody in from the waiting room, but when we added your Halton Garden talk to our Facebook page, like it just lit up. Everybody was so excited. They're like, oh, I'm so glad there's going to be a talk on succulents. I kill mine every time I buy a plant. And, you know, I had a little chuckle, and I'm in the same boat, so I'm not making fun of anybody. But I was imagining that scene from, I think it's Finding Nemo or maybe Finding Dora, when they open up the fish tanks to the kids and all the fish creatures like just hide because they don't want to be touched. So I'm just imagining like they open up the nursery doors, people walk into the store and all the cacti are like, oh, not me, don't pick me. So anyway, I'm so glad you're here so that we can learn not to suck at succulents. So welcome, Brenda.
Thank you so much. And you know, you are not alone, and all the people that are here tonight are not alone. My first forays into succulents, I sucked at. I have a couple of succulents that I'm sucking at currently, but it's all just a little bit of a learning curve, and we just have to pay attention to what we're doing with them, and maybe a few hints that you're going to learn tonight, and we can all have wonderful succulents. So I'm just going to start off right away. And what I'm going to do just real quickly here before I start is I'll just pin myself so that you'll all have me as well as this little slide presentation. So good evening. I'm so happy to be presenting to you all this evening. Like they said, my name is Brenda Ley, and very much like yourself, I have plant problems. Some of my plant problems are probably a little different than yours, mostly because I have too many plants, and that's just beyond help. But I'm quite convinced that if it's not hoarding if it's plants. And I probably have 200 or 300 house plants in my house right now. So let's just get started off with this presentation. How not to suck at succulents. So how about I left click and not right click? I am a self-confessed gardener of excess. My outdoor space is huge, and I fill it every year with a yearly competition with myself to have bigger, louder, more colorful, more over-the-top plantings. I like yellows so bright they hurt my eyes. I like purples so dark that they are almost black. Give me great big crazy splotches of color. Give me dahlias as big as my head. I want them all. Anything like you see like this with striping, with a crazy color, those are the plants I want. I want them all. I want them to be changed every year. What you're looking at here, and I'll just quickly go back because I went far too quick there on you. Let me go to the previous. Is the same location in my garden from one year until the next. So there it is, 1 year. And here we're seeing it the next year with a completely different plantings. I don't like to see the soil beneath the plantings. And I also don't really like to see the deck between my containers. There's a lot going on in every corner of my really big property, and you'll probably see something new every time you come and every year that you were to come in my garden. There's another really big planter that I have towards the back of my house. We're talking big. This planter here, the planter itself is 120 centimeters tall, and this container arrangement topped out at close to 7 feet tall. So the scale kind of gets a little lost in my garden because you don't really realize how big some of the things are that you might see in pictures. That previous bed that we were looking at, that's about a 16-foot wide bed, and it had about an 8-foot tall fence running through the middle of it. I also like really quite a lot to measure things and to try every year to grow bigger and bigger varieties of things. This is actually a moonflower, which is a night blooming flower. It's very similar to an Imopia, not an Imopia. How did that come out? A morning glory. And this one here is almost 14 centimeters wide. That's one flower. So, you know, we're close to 5 inches there. I want my vegetable garden to feed the whole neighborhood, not just myself. As you can see, these 4 huge bags of lettuce out front here didn't even put a dent in what my garden is. It's another area of excess around my house. Great big rafts of tomatoes. This was one tomato that I had last year that was such a heavy producer. I probably gave it away by grocery bags most of the summer. It was literally producing me bunches like this, 5 and 6 at a time all summer, and it was indeterminate and it was just all over the place. This tomato is actually called Juliet, and I bought it just on a whim, not even looking at what it was. Just for my friend Juliet. So everybody in the neighborhood eats out of my garden. The only person I have a problem with eating out of my garden is Mr. Bun Bun here. We had a bit of a landlord-tenant dispute last summer. I did not manage to evict him all summer. My dogs and I will probably try and do it again this summer, but as I live out in the country, this is one of the hazards that you're going to have in a vegetable garden, which is why a lot of my stuff actually is up in containers. So last year, on the 1st of June, amid COVID and within the municipal guidelines of the time, myself as the plant sale chair for the Milton Horticultural Society and 2 of our co-presidents, Jennifer and Leanne, thought it would be a great idea to have a socially distanced outdoor plant sale. And we thought it would be such a great idea. And we thought we would pull it off in 18 days with next to no budget. And guess what? It was a fantastic idea. Except for the part where the septic tank pumping truck had to come the day before the sale, but something like that is always bound to happen. And if something bad happens the day before your event, you know your event is going to run like clockwork. I actually had my internet go down yesterday. So that's how I knew today was going to be just perfect. So this is a bit of a view of our plant sale. And as you notice, we had direction arrows like you'll see in grocery stores. Just for everyone's safety. It was something we were able to do at the time. We could get everyone outside, and it was a blast. This is another view of some more of the plants and looking back towards my house. If you're a follower of Milton Horticultural Society or have ever been to our plant sale, keep your eyes out for exciting new news for our plant sale this year. We're going to have a doozy for you this year, and it will not be one to miss. Isn't this lovely? So after the plant sale, you figure you're going to relax. Not so much me. 3 days after the plant sale, I was in the hospital. And then I was put on bed rest until a surgery, which didn't happen 2.5 months later. And this became where I would spend my time, on this lounger. On my covered porch, surrounded with as many container plants as I could get brought in close to me. With my plenty of electronic devices and Wi-Fi, but unable to work in my big garden, which was close enough to touch. And I was basically watching it suffer day by day as I sat in this lounger board day by day, waiting for surgery. A very dear friend of mine at the time gifted me with a little selection of succulents. And this is where we get to the part about all listening to me tonight. I figured this was easy. I can grow anything. Chuck them in a pot and let them go. Yeah, no, not so much. Within a couple of weeks on this shaded porch, those succulents had started to stretch out and not look their best. I began reading, I began researching, I began reading more. I really had nothing else I could do. And I began learning what I was doing wrong with these plants. It also led, unfortunately, the more I read, to the more succulents I wanted to buy or otherwise obtain. And like I've already mentioned, I have plant problems, and one of those problems is I need all the plants. All the plants should belong to me. So, anyways, this here, what you are looking at is that very first succulent planter that I put these plants into the beginning of last summer. And as you can see, it does not look very well at the time right now. There are only 3 things that any plant requires, and succulents are just the same. And those 3 things basically boil down to water, soil, and light. Being mindful of these things and paying a certain amount of attention to each specific plant and these things, your succulents are going to look beautiful. I know every single one of you probably joined up to this talk because you have a succulent sitting in your house somewhere that looks something like this, or you have thrown a poor succulent baby into the garbage because he looks something like this, and that doesn't have to happen. We are going to look at some varieties of succulents here first, just real easy. I'm not a super big stickler on the proper scientific names. I think it's not that important to get hung up on those things. And then we're going to show some actual examples of those plants, discuss their needs, and then we're going to do an actual online demonstration about some rehabilitation and some propagation of some plants, actual examples. So here we go. Cacti are succulents, but not all succulents are cacti. So basically, all succulents store a certain amount of water in their flesh. One that you may be familiar with from a lot of viral videos last year is the Epiphyllum, or night blooming cereus. Sometimes they're called queen of the night or orchid cactuses. You might have seen these videos where they're coming into bloom and they're doing them in slow or sped up motion of the bloom opening, because these bloom only at night. And usually only for one night per blossom. And then after that night is over, those blossoms are spent, so the plant may have a number of blossoms in succession, usually only once a year. Now, the only thing I'm going to say about this photo we're looking at, this is the only photo in tonight's presentation that isn't mine. I have yet to have this plant bloom for me. This is a photo that was available on Pinterest. Only photo you're going to see that's not mine. But I had to show you this plant in bloom because I am so excited that I have quite a lot of this plant propagating. As I said, it only blooms for one night, usually only once night a year, but certain varieties of this plant can bloom up to 3 times a year, but we're talking under super ideal conditions in their natural habitats. And those are some pretty hot, dry, arid areas. Actually, there are a number of varieties in the southern states of these type of cacti. So the Ichinopus is another large genus of cacti, and it's what a lot of us think about when we think about cacti. These guys have names anywhere from peanut to hedgehog to sea urchin, and they basically, from the tiniest little globes to the great tree-like cactuses. And I'm talking the big 3-armed guys that we're also familiar with from Wiley Coyote. This cactus here actually belongs to one of my very good friends. These are a bunch of babies that I just got all pushy and stole off her last fall. But this cactus as well, outdoors on a baking hot porch in Niagara with not a lot of concern or care, every summer rewards her with these incredible, beautiful white blossoms. This just is such a treat every summer, and it blows me away, this cactus, when you see it in real life, because one of the things about this bloom, and I went through 3 or 4 different pictures of it, this is the purest, whitest flower with the purest, whitest throat. There is no color whatsoever to this flower. It's just absolutely stunning. Like I said, it blooms outside in the porch in late summer, and it spends its winters beside a sliding door, and it is just a rock star, this cactus. I really wish one day, maybe the whole thing is mine, but I'll have to be happy with just the pieces. And I'll show you some of those in a few minutes again. So Sansevieria is another type of succulent, and these are the guys that we are very familiar with called mother-in-law's tongues or snake plants, or there are even whale fins, different shapes of leaves, but they're basically very tall and strappy, with the exception of this guy, who's actually the same one and is called Macado, one of the smallest little Sansevieria you can find. And if you have a little dark office and you want a little piece of drama somewhere, this is one of the best little rock solid, super low maintenance Sansevieria plants that you can find out there. And they do come in a number of different shapes and colors. You'll often see Sansevieria which have yellows and whites, dark greens into the blues and whatnot. And I have a really super fun one that's been keeping me company most of COVID, that I will show you in a little bit as well. So then we're going to move on to the Echeveria, and these beautiful rosettes are most of our succulent dreams. These are the ones everybody wants. These are the ones everybody wants to keep. They're fleshy leaves and pastel shades, from pinks to reds, every green, baby blue, green so dark we're almost back again. And these are the sun worshipers. These are the ones that really want to be out in the sun, unlike the Sansevieria. And to keep the form of these plants down tight and not to get them stretched out, and we're going to talk about this, these are the guys that need all the sun all the time. Here's another little one. Great little decoration here for a little girl. And here we're looking at some propagations I have of this here. The one that you see on the right of your screen, I know is Pearl von Nürnberg. The one on the left of the screen is a propagation that I only started just before Christmas. It is an Echeveria. I don't know the name of it. Oftentimes when we get our Echeverias, it's really hard to know their true and proper names. This little one here, again, is an Echeveria. A lot of times people will call these lipstick plants. This is actually Black Knight, and it is not so Black Knight right now. It's a bit of a new addition, and it does seem to be darkening. There's a possibility I'm thinking it maybe didn't have quite enough light when it was being grown, so it lost a bit of its color there. So then after that, Haworthia, and Haworthia and Haworthia, they are the biggest group, and it is probably undoubtedly one of my favorite groups of succulents. All of these are Haworthia, and as you can see from that picture, they all look very, very different. One of the ones that a lot of you might know, and you can see this in this decorative sculpture up the top here a little bit easier, are the zebra plants. And these are the banded, very stiff, upright leaves. And these guys, again, are rock stars. They do not require near as much care as some of the other plants you might have. And they do very, very well in close quarters, these guys, I find. This guy here is known as a Willy Sanchio. He is actually a green plant, but all the white hairs on the surfaces are what makes him look white. He's actually one of the ones that requires the least amount of moisture. So if you're going to be the person who doesn't want to water their plants, then this might be a good one for you. This is where the Haworthias got me. The translucent windows of some of the Haworthias, the light shining through them is like nothing else I have ever seen before. And my very first one, it was just life-changing. I could not stop holding this beautiful plant up to the light and just reveling at the light shining through the leaves. Every single morning as the sun was coming up through the back window, I was looking at these plants, which all sit on the rack behind me. And the Haworthia with their clear translucent windows are my favorite. There's another one there, little Argenteo, this guy is called. I'm not doing so well with him, but we will see once we hit the growing season again. He could just be sleeping. And again, with these guys, it's all to me about the light coming through the translucent windows in the petals, in the leaves. And there again, there's another one. The reason that these plants have evolved to have these translucent leaves is because in their natural environment, they can sometimes be found partially submerged by soil or sand. And what that does is it protects them from the natural heat of the day. And then by having the translucent windows up in the top of the plants, it allows the light to come down into the plant, and therefore the plant is able to photosynthesize on much better. So that is basically the end of this. And let me quickly just close this, which will unshare my screen. There we go. Excellent. So I'm just going to change my view here so that I can unpin myself. I'm going to change my view.
Oh, it's okay. You can stay pinned because we're going to ask you questions now.
Well, no, we're not getting to the asking questions yet.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
Because we have other stuff. So I'm looking at the clock and I'm half an hour through, but let's look at some other stuff because this is what we got to talk about. And I'm going to stand up because I have discovered this week in trying to practice, I don't talk real well sitting down. So this is where we're going to go. So 3 things cactus need, and this is the part we're talking about how to take care of the cactus, because we really only touched really briefly on it. So basically, cacti and succulents need a lot less water than most of your plants. What I think you should really do is do everything you can to try and find out what group, what family, or what exact type your succulent is before you start taking care of it. Like I said, something like the Haworthias, they're a bit more of a mid-range light plant. They do take some shade in their natural environment, where if you're wanting to grow an Echeveria and have it look beautiful, you're going to want to have more sun on that. If you want to grow a Sansevieria, you can bury it in the back corner without the sun, and it'll do quite fine in a really dark office. There's a bit bigger example of that Macado Sansevieria that we saw earlier. And I promised you I had a really, really fun Sansevieria. And this Sansevieria sat in front of my TV for a while. And then suddenly I had a brainstorm one day. So this is my starfish Sansevieria. And his name is Levon. And he just kind of hangs out in front of the TV. I don't know. COVID was really, really getting to me. Like I said, Sansevieria come in a lot of super interesting shapes. You know, so this is a Sansevieria. This is a Sansevieria as well. Always very, very long leaves. And super easy, a little slower to propagate than some. The next thing that plants require, and any plants, be them succulent. Oh, sorry, I'm going to digress because we're going to go back to water because I flipped a page too soon. So basically, the thing about succulents is they're on-demand waterers. You can't just say, I'm going to water my succulents every 2 weeks. Succulents don't work like that. Your succulents, you need to be mindful and you need to address and look at your succulents on a somewhat regular basis. I look at mine every day. You can look at them once a week. And basically, you're not really going to be wanting to water your succulents until they've completely dried out and then some. Sometimes I will look to my succulents for signs of crinkling, signs of the leaves softening, things like that. They actually can put up with a lot longer of a drought than you would imagine. Stick your finger all the way into those plant pots. If that succulent isn't feeling completely bone dry down to the very bottom, you don't want to water that succulent. The other thing about succulents and water is you always want to have a really well-drained pot. You do not want your succulents to be sitting in water. You want really, really well-drained succulent soil. And this kind of, we're going into soils, but we're going to go back into watering a bit because a really well-drained succulent soil, you can get something like a Pro Mix succulent soil, a Miracle Grow succulent soil. There are some really good granular succulent soils out there. I tend to take perlite and mix it, sometimes almost half and half, with the commercial succulent blends that I buy. And the one thing I want to tell you all, and this is a common thing that some plant people do at the start of their planting lives, is they mix up these two products, Vermiculite and Perlite. They look really similar, but they're two really different things. And if you're growing succulents, you want the Perlite. The Perlite is going to drain your plants quicker. It's going to keep it so that the water runs through it. Where Vermiculite is frequently mixed with peat for seed starting mixes because it holds water. So just make sure when you're buying these two things that you're buying perlite for your succulents and vermiculite for your seeds. So we're going to have our soil. And the one mistake that I find a lot of people do with succulents and a lot of people do with potted plants in general is if your plant has really good drainage in its pot, I don't want people to think that they should be putting aggregates into the bottoms of those pots. And I actually have a demonstration here. And earlier today, I took these 2 glasses, and I'm going to go slow and up to the camera so you can see. And I'm going to show you them one at a time. But basically, I put the same amount of water in the bottom of these 2 glasses. And then I put some gravel in the bottom of this one, and then I put the same amount of soil in the bottom. And I want to show you, and this may blow some of your minds, because you never understand why you're getting root rot in your plants. But basically, this well-drained soil that I have here, as you can see, the 1/4 cup of water that I put in the bottom of this glass, it soaked the soil up about 3/4 of the way. So, you know, if the roots of our plants are sitting in wet, too wet a soil for too long, we can get root rot. So we want, you know, our soil to be able to drain. If you go and put aggregate in the bottom of your pot, basically all you're doing is you're bringing that level of wet soil higher up in the pot. And I think you can probably see the difference. So this holds true whether there's drainage in the bottom of your pot or not. This is really a practice that I wish people would get out of, because it's really not necessarily. And actually, pulled back there, it's a little easier to see how the wet soil level is so much higher. And again, exact same amount of soil, but you can see what keeping the aggregate in the bottom does to it. Don't do this to your plants. You're not helping them. I know you are all thinking you're helping them, but you're not. And, you know, the last thing that your succulents are going to need, like we talked about, is the sun. Please research every plant you have and make sure you're getting them enough sun. The reason that your succulents are stretching out, if we're talking about some of those Echeverias, and I had to write it down because it is a word that I just learned the technical term for today, but it is called Etoilation. And basically, if you look that word up in the dictionary, it's to bleach or alter natural development of a green plant by excluding light, to make it pale, and to deprive it of vigor. So if you're not giving your plants what they want, that's when they're not going to do well. And that's going to wrap that bit up, because I got to move along a bit closer because I really wanted to show you something. Anyways, I want to show you how to rehabilitate a succulent. I'm sure all of you guys have an Echeveria that looks like this. And I tell you, I've had since Christmas up against a window abusing him. And I'd really like this to look better in the spring. And this is something that all of you can do. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to propagate this succulent. And Echeveria are really great plants because they propagate so easily by offsets. So basically, I can just take a leaf off this Echeveria like this. And then I'll set it on a plate. which because of the light, you're not going to be able to see, and I'll let them dry for a little while. And then I'm basically just going to take those after they've dried for a week to 10 days, each individual leaf. And I'm going to place them in a bowl of damp soil here. And I actually cover with a bag or this is actually a clear shower cap. But one of the things I don't want you to do is I don't want you to cover them and leave them covered all the time. You want them to go through a cycling of a little bit of drying and then a little bit of moistening and then a little bit of drying and a little bit of moistening. And this way you will get roots on your plants or on your leaves way faster, and then you can plant those guys. Another really crazy thing that happens with Echeveria when you get them tall like this is sometimes you will have a leaf half break off. And if you have a leaf, and it's very hard to see, if you have a leaf half break off, you will sometimes have a plant form right where that leaf has broken off, and then you can allow it to grow there for a number of months until it gets big enough that you can take that half broken off leaf, try and get out of the light here so you can see it, and pull it off that plant with roots and plant attached. Isn't that cool? The last thing we're going to do to rehab this succulent I'm just decapitated that. And it's not over for this guy, because the very last thing I'm going to do to this guy, I'm going to keep taking these leaves off because I don't want to just have one new succulent. I want to have, probably 20 or 30 because, as we've discussed, I need to have all the plants. So we're going to take all these leaves off all the way around, and then we're going to have something that looks like that. And then basically all you're going to do, and I'm going to cut this guy just a little shorter, is you're going to leave this to callus over again to get dry so that the surface is, papery. You're going to do that for a week, 10 days. The bigger the plant, the longer it's going to take. The shorter the smaller the plant, the less time it's going to take. And then after you've had it like that for about 10 days, you're just going to stick it in some dry potting soil. And I'm going to leave it probably for another week until it's starting to look like it's really suffering. And that's when I'm going to give it some water. And I'm going to be patient about these things. And I'm not going to give it too much water, but I'm going to actually show you after a while, you will see the formation of roots off those stems. And then you have a brand new plant, although smaller. You do not have to throw it in the garbage. You just put it in its pot. And I'm going to have a brand new plant myself again because I just broke that one. But that's okay because I have lots. And it works with all different kinds of succulents. This one here, I did it with in about November. So I have a whole bunch of other things to show you, but because of the time, it might be easier if we wanted to go through the questions, because some of the things that I wanted to show you will quite likely answer some of those questions.
Hi, perfect. So who else gasped when you beheaded that plant? I didn't know you could do that. So thank you for sharing that. That was quite something.
It's so easy. And you can find really detailed directions on the internet for that type. Some people will call it topping succulents. Just look into some detailed directions and methods on the internet for propagating succulents, and you will see some really great directions to do that. So easy.
Yeah,
So many succulents go in the garbage that shouldn't.
I'm glad you showed that, because I would have thought that was somebody pulling my leg if I had seen that on YouTube. But anyway, okay, so we have questions. How do you promote flowering in cactus?
How do you promote flowering in cactus? You know, the funny thing about cactus is there's two reasons cactuses flower. One is because they're really, really happy. And the second reason cactus flower is because they're in their death throes. Cacti do not require a lot of fertilizer. There are mild cactus succulent fertilizers. Don't overdo it on the fertilizers. Ensuring they have the most optimum light conditions for themselves. And like I said, a lot of times it's just luck or dying.
Is there, well, you know a lot, and you seem to have found out quite a lot in a rather short period of time. Then what were your resources to find out all this information? How did you find out how to do all this?
A lot of internet, a lot of Facebook groups. If you find one particular type of plant you like, join a Facebook group for that type of plant. Plant people are the type of people that want to share. You know, I had a lot of the basics, but honestly, the internet is where you want to go. And one thing I want to tell you all about the internet, and this is my one piece of advice that I hope you can all take away from this. Any of you people who have Google Lens on your telephone, it is one of the most powerful plant tools there is. You don't know what your plant is, you take a picture of it, it's going to take you right into a plant identification app, which is going to take you right into care instructions, which is going to take you down a rabbit hole of plants. People always ask me about plant identification apps. I don't even bother with a plant identification app. I use Google Lens all the time. Great thing for plants.
Yeah, that's great advice. We have a question. Are any of them frost hardy and can be left outside?
Not a lot of what you're seeing here, but they're definitely 100% are frost hardy cacti that can be left outside. I have a patch right beside my water barrel to stop my dogs from going past my water barrel of a cactus called Uptunia, which is eastern paddle cactus. I don't really have anything that looks like, but if you imagine these cactuses, which are these round plates, which stack up on top of each other. Again, the one that grows really well here is called Optunia, Optunia. And like I said, it's great for keeping pets out of spots you don't want them. And there are a few others. You could just Google cacti which are hardy to zone 6, and you would get some answers there of the exact varieties and perhaps even places to purchase them.
Yes, the Opportunii is actually the only cacti native to Ontario.
Yes, but there are a couple others that will do okay here.
So somebody, oh, where did that go? They have a cactus with a flower that's just about done. So should they pull the pod the flower is on off or leave it on, or can they grow a new plant from it?
Well, I always like to leave blooms on plants as long as I can until they dry out. A lot of times when you're seeing a flower dry out or a leaf dry out, it's pulling energy back into the plant. You may be able to get seeds from that cacti. What I would suggest is before the flower is completely done, putting a small envelope or a small bag over that flower, because cacti seeds are notoriously tiny and you will lose them. But yeah, you can absolutely try and grow a new one.
And how long does it take to grow a cactus from a seed? Seems like a long time.
It takes a long time. I am not going to lie. A lot of cacti, like that one we were seeing right at the beginning, grow from big offsets. Much more easily, cacti and succulents grow from offsets than seeds. I have seeds that I started germinating 2 months ago, and I am only just now starting to see the most microscopic succulents. Seed is a long drawn out process, but you know, long drawn out processes are sometimes the most rewarding.
All right, so you talk about cacti having to be quite dry. So is it useful to use a moisture meter?
It is useful, especially if you don't trust yourself. One of the other things you can do, as I always say, is familiarize yourself with the weight of your pots dry. So, you know, I pick a pot up and I naturally know whether that plant is dry. If you don't know, get yourself a moisture meter. And there are moisture meters simply marked dry, moist, wet, you know. So it can be very helpful if you don't trust yourself.
Yeah, I think that would answer the next question. I did a succulent workshop a couple of years ago, 6-inch tall, 6-inch across glass cylinder with layered rocks, soil, mainly for the soil is mainly for, or the rock soil mainly for looks. 4 succulents, 1 is growing tall, 2 hanging over the sides. The Haworthia is fine, so it's hard to see the water. I'm guessing it's hard to kind of gauge the moisture is what they're trying to say. So, but that brings us to somebody else who says they have a mixed planter requiring different sun water requirements. So how do you deal with that?
You take it apart. I actually have one mixed planter that I have a habit of the one plant that really wants the water. I only water that one. And then sort of the other ones which have less watering requirements, they're sort of sucking its leftovers. If you're looking at having Echeveria and Haworthia together, Haworthias tend to be a little bit less light requirements than Echeverias, and Echeverias are going to stretch. I mean, basically, what you can do is you can just completely top those Echeveria, cut them right off at the ground. Let me find something. Hold on. I know it's here somewhere. I saw it earlier. So this is what happens when you have too many plants. And I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but this is a succulent, which I just cut off at the soil level. And I took the 2 little plants. It was a little, I don't remember what it was. Doesn't even matter. And I cut them right off at the surface. And you're like, well, why did you keep that? Because another thing that will happen is months gone on, and this one is only just and you may not even, you may just have to believe me, but they're right here. Yeah, you're not going to be able to see it, but believe me, right here, there is a little tiny microscopic leaf starting from a stem that I cut off. So whenever you do cut off these succulents, like this, I'm not going to get rid of it because I will get in time, and it's a goodly amount of time, a plant come off the side here. And I just realized that I thought I had one. I don't know where it is. We'll get on to another question. And oh, I found it. Here's one, a little bigger, that's growing off from one which I cut off on ground level. And as you can see, there's a new baby plant starting there.
Wow, that's amazing. All right, so the next question is, I keep killing Christmas cactus. What should I do? And I hear you. Whoever this is, I hear you. So what are they doing?
Okay, so you're talking about Christmas cactus. I've killed a few Christmas cactus myself. I'm not a big fan of them. One thing I have to say about Christmas cactus, I don't think the small ones or the bigger ones that I see doing well, they keep a certain amount of moisture in them. They are a lot of times in bigger pots, and we want to let them dry out too much. You know, I think they need just a little bit more water than some of us want to give them. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, they don't want the dry that you're talking about with the other ones.
Yeah, they want a little bit of moisture to suck up.
And somebody asked, can you grow prickly pear outside? So yes, I believe you're referring to our native one, the opportuni. I think that's, so the prickly.
Yeah, the opportunia. You can grow it outside. Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
Just make sure you get the one from Ontario. Come to the Milton Horticultural Society plant sale. We'll sell you some.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that's a good, good tip. Right, so I have a couple of questions. So when you are dividing your cactus, how do you know what size of pot to put it in? Like, do you want to have, you know, like a fairly big one that you know it's going to grow into, or do you just keep repotting? So how do you know how to do that?
You never want to go to a great big pot. You only ever want to go, and with most plants, you only ever want to go up one size. And, you know, with most cacti, you don't really have to move them or go up a size until they're breaking the pots. They're not a type of plant that needs a lot of room. So you're only ever going to want to go up one pot size. And if you're talking something like these Sansevierias or these mother-in-law's tongues, they actually do better when they're really pot bound. And a lot of people actually, I've seen on the internet buying these lately, and they get all worried because they're actually bound within the pot by the grower. And they're like, oh, I've got to take that out. I've got to take that out. And it's like, no, you don't. It's more likely for that Sansevieria to do well, pot bound and tied with a rubber band than if you separated all of those plants by, you know, an inch or whatever.
All right.
So they actually don't really like the great big pots. They're used to growing between crevices in rocks and, you know, in little not so ideal conditions. So we always want to overlove our plants. It's a bit of a problem we have.
Of course we do. That's why we're all here.
Yeah.
Somebody said, are hens and chicks succulents?
They absolutely are. Hens and chicks absolutely are succulent. They are just the type of succulent that is winter hardy in Ontario. And you'll notice they do great in the sun. They don't require a lot of water. All those things that, you know, our other cacti and succulents are known for. They absolutely are.
Yeah, they don't require a lot of soil either, right? Just they can grow.
No, and because, like I said, you know, these types of plants, they don't have incredibly extensive root systems. They just grow in a little crack between rocks.
Our string of hearts succulents.
Yes-ish. They do, you know, any succulent does. I was actually just looking. Where's the string hearts? There's the string hearts. That's not doing so well. Boop. And I got it caught on the lamp. They do have a little bit of a succulent leaf. There is definitely a thickening, and a succulent is anything that's, and there's a nice string of hearts for you. And a succulent is anything that's going to hold that extra moisture in its leaves.
Great. So we have time for just a couple more questions here. One of them is, do you have the same sort of advice about drying out? It's about an aloe plant, and sometimes you see the babies pop up. So what is your advice for creating a new plant from those babies?
Basically, if you see those little babies pop up, I mean, once I would basically just go in with my fingers and see if I can wiggle them out. Usually they will just pull up out of the side. They don't have an incredibly extensive root system. They don't need an incredibly extensive root system to start. You know, always when it is a succulent and it's counterintuitive to what we always do, always start them for a few days in dry soil. And then after a few days, after they've sat in the dry soil, then preferably bottom water them, because what you're always going to want is for them to try and make new roots to go looking for the water.
Awesome. Okay. Some of the photos you showed had gravel covering the soil. So why is there gravel there, and when should I use it?
What you're seeing was perlite, I think, on the soil. I mix a lot of my soil mediums almost half and half with perlite for my succulents, and sometimes it does come up to the top. None of them actually had gravel. There may have been some small granular volcanic bits, but not really. I mean, you can always put some very, very small fine gravel in your succulent mix, but not on the top of the soil per se. It's not necessary. Sometimes for decorative purposes, and sometimes to stabilize things until they you know, lock into the soil.
Right. Oh, and now the questions are coming. So how would you propagate donkey tails, Sedum Morgranium?
Basically, you're going to do the same thing as we're going to do with the Echeverias. You're just gonna, and it's funny because I have a bowl I pop leaves into all the time when they break off if I'm moving things. You're not going to be able to see it, but basically you're going to do exactly the same thing as you're going to do with an Echeveria. Any of those leaves that fall off or pull off, one option is to just leave them on the surface of the soil of the mother plants. Another option, let them callus over for a few days with the tiny leaves of the donkey tail. Doesn't take but, you know, 2 or 3 days, and then some moist soil, and there you go. Again, you can also, if you have one that gets long, cut it the same way we were talking and stick it in some dry soil.
All right. Hope that answered your question. Do you ever want to use fertilizer for succulents?
I wouldn't do it. I mean, you really want to read up onto it. It is a very, very weak fertilizer solution, and you really probably only at the beginning of their growing seasons in the spring and in the fall give them a little bit of it. In the summer, a lot of succulents do take a bit of a rest, and again, they take a bit of a rest again in the winter. So, you know, towards the beginning of the spring and the beginning of the fall is best. If you have just put that succulent into fresh soil medium, you know, there's going to be some nutrients there. So, you know, it's not as important with a lot of other super greedy, hungry plants.
So you talk about the changing of the seasons there. So my house gets quite cold in the winter. Am I killing my succulents?
Oh, sorry about the noise. If your house gets quite cold, my house actually is a little colder than most. It's just probably going to slow your succulents down. You're really not going to damage your succulents per se, unless, you know, 65, 60 degrees. I mean, I call my house cool and it sits at 70. So really what we call a cool house is not going to do so much damage to the succulents as you're thinking. They are fine, like I said, down to 65 degrees easily.
Now, I think everybody is drooling with envy at all those plants behind you. So we have a question of what is the most uncommon succulent that you have in your collection?
I have a succulent that I don't even know what it is. It's a recent one. Actually, I have a few, but I don't even know what this is. It is a succulent. It's a type of ball type succulent. I actually only, ladies got to pardon me for 1 minute. He's trying to get them to quiet down. Anyways, bit of a ball with these grassy, funny things on the top. That's probably one of the most unusual.
So people have some suggestions. Is it a blooming onion or a ponytail palm?
It's not a ponytail palm. It may be a blooming, no, it's weird. I gotta look. I really haven't even had the time to look into what it is. I'm really, really fond of those Haworthias. Those window panes, looking at the light through them, they are definitely my favorites, and that's what I keep on adding. I want to show you real quick before we go my favorite project and what I'm doing with a lot of my succulents. And it's right here. And I know we've all seen these on the internet, but I am making myself a large hanging succulent ball.
That is awesome. Wow.
And I will eventually fill every single square. And check out that big baby right in the top in the middle. Gorgeous, eh?
Yeah, it looks quite happy.
It's doing good. It's just not easy to get in and out from under the lights.
Yeah, I imagine. All right, so one last question and then we'll let you go. This has been a fabulous talk. I think everybody's enjoyed it. What does it mean if the succulent leaf looks like it's cracking on top? Should they take it off and repropagate?
A succulent leaf looks like it's cracking on top?
Yeah, so I'm guessing it looks like it's got the brown veining, maybe. I'm not sure. if
I
they
mean,
want to kind of
any
add it.
damaged leaf is never going to do any plant any good. Take it off if it's an appropriate type. You see, a lot of times when you're propagating a leaf like this, you do need the point where it attaches to the plant. But if you're propagating something like these night blooming cereus cacti, those you can actually take a leaf, cut it off, and stick the leaf in. So it's really gonna into the soil. So it's really gonna depend on what actual type of leaf it is. The Haworthia don't tend to propagate well from leaf cuttings. You know, I'd have to see what it is.
Right, you'd have to know what type. Well, this has been a fabulous talk. I've really enjoyed it. It's been like looking behind you and seeing all those plants and finding out that it's not as tough as it should be. That's for sure. Oh, look at that. How many do you have?
I think I stopped counting somewhere around 250 a couple of months ago.
Wow. And this has just been in the last few years?
No, actually, I have always been like a gardener. And I used to always, you know, try and jam all these big plants into my house. But like being ill over the summer and the big plants just went by the wayside. And I just started with the smaller and smaller plants. And I actually farmed a couple of my big outside plants that usually spend the winter in my living room off to foster homes this winter. So I really, you know, COVID made a different year for everyone, and it really completely changed the focus of the plants that I keep in my house. And when you're propagating plants and you're making, you know, new succulents by a tray at a time, you know, there's 25 in there, right? How many plants do you need? Well, I need all the plants.
and that's a good way to wrap up this talk. Thank you so much for joining us today, Brenda. That was amazing.
I thank everyone for coming. I had a wonderful time, and I hope to see you all at a Milton Horticultural Society event.
Oh, absolutely. When is this? Tell us about your plant sale and your CD.
Actually, so Milton Horticultural Society has a CD Saturday event, which is going on in March. If you want to go to www.miltoncdsaturday.com, you can find our information. Our plant sale, annual plant sale, is going to be on the 15th of May this year. Milton Horticultural Society, www.miltonhortsociety.com. Also, Milton Horticultural Society on Facebook. If you like speakers, we are a horticultural society. You want to join. A single membership is only $20 for the year. And this year had a schedule of 19 speakers included for that $20 membership. So it is a steal of a lifetime, and everyone's welcome.
Beautiful. Thank you very, very much.